Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda. Welcome to this important training video from Ignition Time. I want to be one of the most comprehensive people on the internet providing you with information about how to get to the next level financially, which is why I have put together a detailed 7-point breakdown of the HEALS Act. This is the 7-point Republican proposal that is going to be discussed with the Democrats. So keep in mind that everything I'm about to share with you is just a starting point, but it is a starting point. In other words, the Democrats will try and push things in the other direction towards what they want. So in this video, I'm going to go over a 7-point summary of the HEALS Act, and I'll talk to you about the glaring exclusions and the glaring inclusions that I noticed. So let's get right into it. The Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell basically introduced the HEALS Act, which is health, economic assistance, liability protection, and schools. And parts of the proposed bill actually look very, very similar to the CARES Act that was passed back in March, and other parts are something, things that the Democrats are not going to like at all. So that's going to lead to significant negotiations between the Democrats and the Republicans, and that's what we are going to see unfold in the next few days. Hopefully it won't take longer than that, but this could actually drag on into the month of August. So in this video, I'm going to go over stimulus checks, unemployment benefits, the eviction moratorium, which is a glaring exclusion. I was the first person on YouTube that broke the news about the HEALS Act, and I pointed out the glaring exclusion of eviction moratoriums, which I feel the Democrats are going to fight tooth and nail for. I'm going to so that's stimulus checks, unemployment benefits, the eviction moratorium, student loan protections, which I also believe are glaring exclusions, support for states. That's a big one. That's a glaring exclusion in the HEALS Act. An FBI building, an FBI building, which is a glaring inclusion. And finally, 100% deduction for expenses for restaurant meals. Now, there's a reason why the Republicans introduced that. I mean, I own multiple businesses, so when I go to a restaurant, I haven't been to a restaurant in a few months, but half of your expenses towards meals, business meals, are considered deductions, but they want 100% of those meals to be deductions, so individuals can go out and expense meals, and that can rejuvenate the economy, that can rejuvenate the restaurant industry. So that's the whole idea there. But let's get into it. I'll also, by the way, go over initial reactions from Democrats. I'm sure you know what you can expect there, but there are some pretty interesting and not so fun reactions from Democrats. These are all initial reactions. Let's get right into it. Stimulus checks. The Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that a second set of $1,200 stimulus checks would follow, but there would be quote unquote more support for adult dependents. Now, the HEALS Act will basically provide $500 per dependent regardless of age. And remember, this was capped at age 17 with the original CARES Act. So that's something interesting to take note. Now, also, if you remember, there was a lot of talk that was thrown around about people under $40,000 revenue income actually getting stimulus checks, and Mitch McConnell had actually thrown that number out, the $40,000 number. But it seems like Senator Chuck Grassley, who's the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, basically confirmed that it would be $1,200 and $500 for dependents, and he also confirmed that the income thresholds would be the exact same as the CARES Act. If you remember, the income limits for the CARES Act were that anyone making up to $75,000 would get the $1,200 stimulus check, and that would start to taper down as an individual started to make more money. In fact, if you made more than $99,000 as a couple, if you made more than $99,000 as an individual, and if you made more than $198,000 as a couple, those were important thresholds where the money would taper off. So what Chuck Grassley said was that with these stimulus checks 2.0, regardless of age, these dependents would now be helped. He said some of these dependents would now be helped. So we're going to wait to see what exactly the comment "some" means. It could mean individuals. It could have something to do with their citizenship status. We'll get into that in the coming days and in the coming weeks. So now, clearly, this won't require much debate with the Democrats, because the Democrats also wanted a $1,200 stimulus check in the HEROES Act. So you can be fairly confident that that's going to go through. Now, the one thing that is worth noting is that the Democrats in the HEROES Act wanted $1,200 in the HEROES Act per dependent up to a maximum of 3 dependents, whereas the Republicans have called for $500. So that's the only one area of contention, if you want to call it that, is how much money the families will receive for dependents. So I'll link you to important information below where you can read more about this. But basically the objective here is, unlike under the CARES Act, where the additional $500 was limited to taxpayers with a dependent under 17, the additional $500 will now be provided to taxpayers with dependents of any age. So that's interesting. Even individuals, this is important, even individuals with no income, as well as those whose income comes entirely from non-taxable means tested benefit programs like SSI, are eligible for the full rebate amount. So that's important. The amount of the rebate phases out completely once the income of single filers exceeds $99,000, and once the income of head of household with one child exceeds $146,500, and once the income of joint filers with no children exceeds $198,000. Now the total cost of this proposed bill, just so that my subscribers know, is $1 trillion, about $1 trillion. By the way, the Democrats wanted a $3 trillion bill. That was their Heroes Act. So, you know, gosh, there's a lot of money being thrown around here, you know. This includes many protections that the country received in March, and so basically there will be stimulus checks. Now it does leave out some protections that the Democrats wanted in the Heroes Act, and you know, so we'll be getting into those in more detail in the coming days. So now let's get into unemployment benefits. I've covered this in detail in my channel, and so I definitely recommend you go to my channel and check out all the past videos. But it does reduce the unemployment benefits, capping them at 2. Now this is really important with what the bill proposes. It'll cap the unemployment benefits at $200 a week on top of state benefits. So it'll go down from $600 a week down to $200 a week, and at the end of September, this benefit would switch to providing 70% of wages prior to losing one's job, and there would be a cap in place. In other words, that booster would go from $200 up to $500. So there is a cap. So if you're making, you know, $150,000 on unemployment, you're not going to get 70% of $150,000. In fact, because of the way this bill is designed, in some states, individuals making $50,000 would see a substantial hit to their income relative to the $600 booster that existed prior in the previous world that we lived in. So let's talk about unemployment benefits. So getting into the unemployment benefits, this is super important. I'm going to read out something here that's actually from the Republican bill. This provision would continue supplemental payments of $200 for weeks of unemployment through September. Starting in October, the payment would be replaced with a payment up to $500. Now, this means $500 per week in addition to the state unemployment benefits, when combined with the state UI payment, would replace 70% of lost wages, either via a formula specified in the bill or by a state proposing an alternative method and receiving approval from the Secretary. That's very important language. So the state has to come up with an alternative method. In other words, the state has to calculate it, and the US Treasury Secretary has to approve it. That's what this is saying. So it says here that states that are unable to provide a second payment tied to lost wages by October 5th. So all the pressure is now on the states, right? Again, that language earlier was either via a formula specified in the bill or by a state proposing an alternative method and receiving approval from the Secretary. So the federal government will actually control the money, the booster that the states will hand out beyond the state unemployment benefits. You know, it'll be the $200 initially, and then it'll be capped at 70% up to $500 a week. So in other words, again, it's not going, your booster will not exceed $500 a week as per this plan. Now, if you're confused about this, either go back and watch the video again, or check out the links in the description. I think I was fairly specific. States that are unable to provide a second payment tied to lost wages by October 5th could apply for a waiver from the Department of Labor to continue paying a fixed dollar amount up to 2 months. Again, all the control is now in the hands of the federal government based on this bill. So again, this is a very important distinction. And the bill also says this provision also requires states beginning 30 days after enactment to notify recipients of unemployment insurance and employers about state law regarding return to work and suitable work requirements. You can see that there's a push, there's a subtle push to get individuals back to work. That's what this bill says. And it says specifically states are required to notify individuals of the state's return to work requirements, the individual's rights to refuse to return to work or to refuse suitable work, and how an individual can contest the denial of a claim as a result of these requirements. So essentially the federal government is laying down the gauntlet, if you will, to states, saying, hey, get people back to work and educate them about, you know, the work search requirements. I have done another video on work search requirements on my channel, so you definitely want to check that out. Again, you know, this appears to give the Trump administration's Department of Labor ample authority to actually determine which states can continue paying out the flat bonus versus which states can switch to the complicated 70% scheme. Because remember, the Secretary of the Treasury has to approve the state's formula. So, you know, the Secretary of the Treasury could say, I approve it for some states, and could say, I don't approve it for other states. Isn't that interesting? I mean, when you read between the lines, that's what you notice. And I've talked about this elsewhere on my channel. Sometimes the truth, the reality is when you read between the lines. And when you read between the lines here, the federal government is looking for is essentially looking to approve specific states based on the formula that they come up with. So, you know, something to take into consideration. Now, keep in mind, all of this is just a starting point for negotiations. The proposal sets the bill for conversations between the House and the Senate. In fact, I believe that the discussions between the House and the Senate are going on as we speak, as I record this video, and negotiations are expected to continue into the month of August. And this means that a lot of programs could be up in the air. But I'm hopeful and I'm confident that some of the key components, in my mind, the two key components are the unemployment benefit extensions and the eviction moratorium for rents. I did cover this in another video. It seems that the forbearance will continue, the mortgage forbearance will continue, but the eviction moratorium on rents is not a part of this bill. You know, and you know, Larry Kudlow said, you know, people who get the $1,200 stimulus checks, that'll help them with their rent. That's what he said, and you can check that out in the previous video I did on the channel. Diet Snapper. While the conversations between the Republicans and the Democrats may be smooth when it comes to stimulus checks, you can expect there to be a lot of contention when it comes to unemployment benefits. So I talked about the $200 transitioning to the 70% by the first week of October. In fact, October 5th is the deadline. States have to come up with a formula and then get that approved by the Treasury. So, wow. So now here's something super interesting. Everything in life has a context, and every statement has a context. Now listen to this statement from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He said, we'll propose a weekly dollar amount that is 8 times what Democrats put in place when they controlled the White House and the Congress during the Great Recession. Just so that everyone knows, $25 a week times 8 is $200. And President Obama had a $25 a week unemployment booster, federal booster on top of the state benefits at one point, right? So that is the comparison that the Senate Majority Leader made. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you agree with that comparison or not. I'll just say that we are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic right now. Okay, so and the impact to the economy is significantly worse than it was back in 2008. I actually, during the 2008 recession, I grew my business. I bought a lot of rental properties. And I know that recession. I understand this is nothing like it. This is much worse. So the GOP plan, I talked about that, $200 going to 70%. Oh, and this is important. Chuck Grassley, again, Republican Chuck Grassley, said that the unemployment benefits at $600 would allow workers to get paid. And what he doesn't want is, people should not make more than they would get working. He warned that the higher benefits in the CARES Act would prevent people from going back to work. And he said, what this country needs is workers. I quote, Senator Chuck Grassley said, I quote, what this country needs is workers. So, as you probably might remember, the House under the HEROES Act tried to extend this benefit of $600 additional payments per week through the end of January 2021 in the HEROES Act. So I think there'll be significant contention about this particular issue. Now, eviction moratorium. This to me is a glaring exclusion, and the one thing that really jumps out at me is there is no extension of the eviction moratorium in this GOP bill, which again I expect the Democrats to bring up, because I'm pretty sure they're going to have a problem with this. This is glaring because a lot of people did expect it to be included, and I was one of them. And the rate of people, the amount of people who are not paying rent in July went up to about 32%, according to the Apartments List monthly report. Yet protections against evictions, as I record this video, have already ended, which means millions of individuals will not be able to make the rent, will not be able to make their August rent, and could be potentially homeless. Now, this differs from the HEROES Act because the HEROES Act had a $100 billion emergency rental assistance program, among other features, and this would have provided aid to those who couldn't make their rent. Now, keep in mind, Larry Kudlow and the GOP bill basically are extending forbearance for individuals, for families who live in a home that they own, which is backed by a federal, and the money is backed federally. So they are safe because their mortgage forbearance continues. But if you're a renter, if you're a low income earner, if you're a middle income earner, or let's say you're just not a homeowner, you do not have an extension of the moratorium on evictions, which means your landlord, even if your landlord has a federally backed mortgage, could potentially evict you. So that is not something that has been addressed at the time I'm recording this video. So I doubt that this will actually go from the House to the Senate, this particular provision, because this is going to be a significant area of contention. Student loan protection. This is another glaring exclusion. Student loan payers don't receive a whole lot of protection under this program. The previous stimulus bill offered protections, I'm talking about the CARES Act, including allowing relief to payments through September 2020 or on federal loans. So that was in the previous bill. Now the GOP plan allows deferred payments beyond October 1st only if the student has no income, and if you do find a job, then the payment will not exceed 10% of the income after you account for expenses like food, rent and mortgage. And basically if you have no income, you're not going to make a payment. Now an interesting thing here is, if a current borrower likes their repayment plan, a borrower can keep their repayment plan. In other words, you can keep your student loan, if you don't have to switch to student loan. So that was interesting. Now here's another big glaring exclusion: support for states. Now this does not address state aid, the GOP bill, which many governors had really fought for, because cities, states have essentially been financially, economically destroyed as a result of the pandemic. The HEROES Act did provide $1 trillion to cover state and local budget shortfalls. It was a bigger bill that would drive the country deeper in debt, but it was massive in its scope compared to this. The GOP plan also, another interesting thing, specifically excludes people who've spent time in prison. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to include. Now let's talk about the FBI building. That is a big one. An FBI building, a glaring inclusion here. The GOP pandemic bill allocates almost $1.8 billion with a B for new FBI headquarters in DC, and this was an ask from the administration. So here, let me just make sure the camera is working properly here. Okay, yeah. So this was an ask from the administration, and the Trump administration had opposed the move of the FBI headquarters from the current location, okay, which is close to the Trump Hotel, and it had opposed the move to the suburbs because that would have made that lot available for development. So we're talking $1.8 billion for new FBI headquarters in DC, included in the GOP bill. All right, 100% deductions of expenses for restaurant meals. Now I'm at my 7th point. I'm at my last point. So the proposal is that if an expense is for food or beverages provided by a restaurant, and the word is and, paid or incurred before January 1st, 2021, it would be 100% tax deductible. So if I go to a restaurant and I put it on my business card, and it's a business expense, then it's 100% deductible for me. I'm not entirely sure if this relates to a personal deduction, so I haven't looked into that part, to be completely honest. But the idea here is to encourage individuals to go back to restaurants, to rejuvenate the restaurant industry, because when you go back to a restaurant, a whole bunch of other people now get jobs. The entire hospitality industry, all restaurants are dependent on us going back to eat. I mean, I haven't been out to eat in months, and that's that. And I'm sure neither have you, because of what's going on. So this is an attempt to rejuvenate the economy. As I wrap up, I'm going to give you some initial reactions from Democrats. This legislation, by the way, before I get to that, includes a second paycheck protection program and offers longer term loans to companies in low income communities. And by the way, it would include liability protection for schools, for businesses, healthcare providers, so they don't have to fight frivolous lawsuits while trying to reopen or deliver continuing care. Gross negligence, as far as I know, would not be included, and that actually makes sense because frivolous lawsuits aren't good for anyone except attorneys who fight those lawsuits and individuals without proper cause. The legislation does not offer any new assistance to state governments, something New York and other states have demanded. Now, here's a quote from Governor Andrew Cuomo from New York. He said, "I think it's devastating news for the entire country. I understand Washington is rife with politics. I understand Washington is not willing to put aside politics, even in the middle of a pandemic, which is just disgusting, frankly. But it is also devastating economic news. Even Republican economists," this is Andrew Cuomo, "will all tell you that there can be no economic recovery if you starve the state and local governments." Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said the bill is piecemeal and totally inadequate, calling for support for states, more food assistance, hazardous pay for at-risk workers, and continued eviction protections. He basically criticized the Republican establishment for their actions on unemployment insurance and said it would create chaos because outdated state unemployment systems do not have the technology for it. His exact words were, "The implementation will be a nightmare." So there you have it, everybody. That was the 7-point summary of the HEALS Act, and my goal is to provide you with the most comprehensive information available anywhere, including news channels, including these major stations, because they don't really cover this stuff. It's they believe in controversy as opposed to stuff that will actually necessarily help people. So my goal is to provide you with fair, objective, balanced information. By the way, again, if you noticed, a one-take video. A lot of preparation. What you see in 20 minutes takes about 2-3 hours of reading and preparation, then filming, then editing. Sometimes we don't even edit the videos. I just tell my team, go ahead and upload it. And so in the interests of efficiency, in the interests of time. But long story short, my goal with the Ignition Time channel is to provide you with fair and balanced news, and also to make sure that you have the financial tools to succeed post pandemic, because at the end of the day, we will be past stimulus checks and unemployment benefits, and I will lead you forward, and I will make sure that you reach your financial goals just like I reach my financial goals. In my just a little bit about me really quick. In my life, I've been rich, I've been poor. I should say I have been poor and I'm not anymore, and I've learned a lot of lessons along the way that I'm happy to share with you. I'm an angel investor. I own hundreds of rental properties all over the world. I own multiple companies, and for me, this YouTube channel is a way to give back and is a way to try and pay it forward so that I can help others achieve what I've achieved. I still believe in the American dream. I believe it's possible, and I believe it is in our darkest hours, it is in our most vulnerable moments that we can find the strength to move forward. And I know a lot of us are looking to external sources for strength, whether it's the government, whether it's your employer. But at some point in time, when we get through this, and we will get through this, I think we need strength from within, and that's what I will help you with. I urge you to subscribe to my channel, enable notifications so you get instant updates from me going forward. Also, please click the like button if you learned something new, because I'd love to be able to educate you and help you going forward. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all. I will see you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Sorry this was a long video. All right, I will see you soon. Let me find the little clippy thing